All right, hello and welcome to our first site tour event of 2020 and our first ever virtual site tour from the Women in Architecture Committee. We are very thrilled to be able to present this to you today as we've been having thoughts on how to bring to you the same experience that Women in Architecture has always delivered with our site tours. And as ever, our mission at Women in Architecture is to promote, validate, and illuminate the role of women within the field of architecture through fostering community, fellowship, education, and outreach. We thank, as always, our sponsors who continue to support us in the work that we do. And those sponsors are Michael Shue, Office of Architecture, Page Architects, Rogers O'Brien Construction, Indoor Weather Professionals, Pilgrim Builders, Pfluger Architects, McKinney York Architects, MMD Architects, Gus Bernal Videography, Artisan Hardwood Floors, McCoy Rockford Commercial Interiors, and Miller Imaging and Digital Solutions. Thank you very much. We appreciate your support. Today, we will be presenting the Bear Creek Elementary School project with Barnes Gramatsky Kosarak. Please do put any questions you may have for the panel in the Q&A box, and we will do our very best to present those questions to the panel at the end of the presentation. We also have a survey that we would like you to take some time to fill out at the end of the event so we can get your feedback on how you think we did and how well we presented this project to you. Our moderator for this event is Randy Davis, and she is the subcommittee chair for the site tour series. Randy is a construction administration architect for Nelson Partners. Her current CA work includes the new 31-story Hyatt-centric hotel in downtown Austin, the new Travis County North Campus office building, and the multi-family residential development, Travis Flats. So I'm happy to hand over the floor to Randy to moderate this event with our panel. Thank you, Randy.
Hey everyone, and welcome to our first WiA site tour event of 2021. The mission of our site tours program is to promote the contribution of women to the built environment, to learn from each other, and to share our successes. Through a mix of media, we have taken our tours off-site and will visit Bear Creek Elementary School, a project that is so relevant to our time. Designed pre-COVID, this school is a model for providing a healthy and joyful environment for our children to learn and grow. The image on this slide is a close-up of the limestone veneer. It illustrates the thoughtfulness throughout the project to make each component of the building and site part of the educational experience. And the story today goes beyond the building. This begins and ends with teamwork. It has been an honor to work with these accomplished women in planning today's event. And now for our panel. Our panel today is comprised of 5 key members of the project team. Lauren Goldberg is an architect and principal with Barnes Gramatsky Kosarak Architects. Marissa McKinney is a landscape architect and principal with Coleman and Associates. Sarah Nario is a pre-construction manager with Flinco. Deborah Ebersol is an architect and the owner of Studio D Consulting and Design and is the sustainability consultant for the project. Melissa Sibley is a structural engineer and project manager in DCI's Austin office. Our format for today's event will be a tour of the school, followed by Q&A. Again, please use the chat for networking and put your questions in the Q&A. And now, please welcome Lauren Goldberg.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out to hear about our project. It's one that this panel is incredibly invested in. We took what was a very challenging site, and it was how we addressed those challenges that made the school feel uniquely suited to its place and grounded in the community. All the 2017 bond projects started with the same program, but the results here were customized by the really active participation of the campus advisory team. And we did hit COVID, as Randy said, at the beginning of our construction, but school opened in the fall and is functioning really well within those constraints. And what we want to do today is just tell you stories about how all of that came about. So we're going to move in and do that. The process, start to finish, was collaborative. The campus advisory team, which gets nicknamed the CAT, and we often just say the CAT, are folks selected by AISD to provide guidance to design and construction teams on everything in the process. They provide input on program to finishes. And typically the group includes principals and staff from schools, parents and community members. And of course, we were a new school, so we had to borrow folks from both Kuiper and Baranof communities. We also met with folks from the Circle C community, students from Kuiper and Baranof, and department heads from AISD to get everybody's input. The students actually gave us incredibly valuable input. They prioritized all the program pieces, and I know it will shock you to learn outdoor play came in first. They helped us develop an idea for the neighborhood entrances, which you'll see in a minute. At this point, I'd like to introduce you to David Chrissy, who's Bear Creek's principal. He participated in the CAT team from the beginning and has accomplished amazing things with the school since it's opened.
I was named principal at Bernice Kuiper Elementary in May of 2018, and one of the purposes behind what was then called New Southwest Elementary was to relieve Kuiper because we were over capacity. We were actually at 153% capacity. So the reason why I sat in, as well as another principal from the other school, Baranof, that we were relieving, this project was relieving, was to give input based on the fact that we were a part of the vertical team, meaning that all of our kids go to WiA High School, and also that our students would eventually end up coming to this new school, and they wanted principal input with people that had, you know, some sort of stake, that it was relevant input. It wasn't just two random people. So almost immediately I started attending meetings with Lauren Goldberg and the campus architectural design team, and just along with parents, along with teachers and students at certain points, just provided a whole lot of input. And Lauren's job was to distill all of the feedback that we were giving her and her firm into some sort of workable design. So that was my initial involvement, was attending a meeting once a month basically, and it was held at Bernice Kuiper Elementary in our library. And you know, some of the meetings were relatively quick. Others, we spent an hour talking about how the bathrooms were going to end up looking. So, you know, I really, long before I had even any kind of interest of serving as principal here, really commended Lauren and her team being as patient as they were and trying to get it right? Like that was their intent, was to try to get it right, not to rush the process along, but knowing that there was a timeline too. So I'm sure that was always weighing on the back of their mind, like, you know, hey, look, you know, we got to get this going.
So the school is located in far southwest Austin. In fact, part of the property is actually in Hayes County, part is in Travis. And as you just heard, it was designed to provide relief for the Baranof and Kuiper communities, which were both overcrowded. It was a really challenging site with a lot of constraints that all needed to be addressed. Marissa?
So this piece of property was actually gifted to AISD by the development that it sits within, which is common for school districts. It's a large site at 19 acres. It has 60 feet of fall from the left side there on Escarpment Boulevard down to the southeast side. So the generous gift of 19 acres only came with 4 acres of impervious cover. So quick math, only 21% of the site is developable. The land is heavily treed with natives, which you'll see in coming slides, which provides excellent habitat for the federally protected golden cheek warbler, which Sarah will talk about how that impacted construction. An electrical easement bifurcates the site, and that also limited what could be developed within the easement. We're within the Edwards Aquifer Recharge Zone, so that means all stormwater needs to stay on site. We cannot discharge to the Bear Creek and Slaughter Creek watersheds. And we also have a nice critical environmental feature, which Lauren will talk about a little bit later as well, some surprises that came with that. So these images on the next slides show the natural character of the site. It also introduces another female member of the team, Lisa Killander, who is the AISD arborist, who walked us through all of the trees on site and which ones were critical to keep and which ones were not doing as well and thriving so that they could be removed as part of construction, which helped us site the building and all the site elements.
So these significant trees are shown in this diagram as the darker red circles, and the critical environmental features as identified by the environmental resource inventory are shown in the lighter pink circles, dash lines. They were karst features that had been identified, and the shaded areas are too steep to build. So you can see that already we are working around some challenges of where to place this building on the site. Ultimately, there was only one karst feature that we needed to protect on the site. And everyone asked me, what does it mean? What does it mean to be a karst feature? Well, somewhat surprisingly, after all of the initial research and studies that were done, we found an additional karst feature, of course, when we were doing construction in the area that we were putting the pond. So I can show you exactly what a karst feature looks like. Think it's a drainage feature through the limestone. So think like a cave or a sinkhole. And when we found this, work had to stop until the city investigated. It was ultimately determined that this was not a critical environmental feature and we could continue, but I wanted to show you what we're talking about when we talk about karst. All of this, the karst, the warblers, the slope, they all affected the logistics that Flinco, who was our contractor, had to deal with. So Sarah's going to talk to that.
Thanks, Lauren. So in order to mitigate schedule impacts from these items, we knew we needed to get the site cleared and excavation behind us as soon as possible. Though we had had reports from site explorations to look for further karst features than the one that was identified, we knew that the results weren't foolproof and that contingencies were in order in case we found something new like we did during construction. In addition to the karst challenge, as was mentioned, this site was a habitat for golden cheek warblers, which provided a specific window on when the site needed to be cleared before their nesting season began. So had we waited for final construction documents before we started construction, that window would have been missed by a long shot. So to work around this, we had an early civil package and early civil GMP and worked with the engineer to obtain a site clearing permit by early February, followed by a mass excavation permit in March. So we were successful in clearing the site before the warbler blackout period and pushed forward with excavation to expose those further unforeseen conditions, like the karst feature in the pond. So now Lauren will go over some of the site layout.
So particular to this site and somewhat unusually, we only touch one street, escarpment, which is meant that we needed to be careful to separate the bus and the parent drop-off and to provide enough queuing area so that traffic on escarpment wasn't affected. But of course, providing that queuing area on our site is acting against our impervious cover limitations. We have building 1, which is the L-shaped building in the front, and building 2, which is the 3-story academic in the back, and they're connected by 2 bridges. The bus drop-off loop on the left side of the slide drops off to the back and you enter through the small bridge between building 1 and building 2. And what that did is it provided really good flexibility for where the students went in the morning once COVID was an issue. Marissa?
So this site plan goes over some of the areas that Lauren just spoke about, the main entry, the bus entry, but what it really shows is AISD's commitment to 21st century learning. And that means learning throughout the campus. So you'll see in purple some of the outdoor classrooms that are noted, in orange, the play areas, which also are areas of learning for students. Adjacent to those play areas is the teal hardscape play that occurs. And there's also some outdoor dining, which we'll see later on in the presentation. So we've talked a little bit about our tree protection, which looks a little stark in these photos, but what you could see from that aerial that Sarah showed was how we really nestled the buildings into the site. So these were all the trees that were deemed protected and really, really important to AISD. You'll also see the boulder pile in the middle there. So as Sarah was saying, when they did the early excavation package, we discovered we had a lot of rock. So we modified our plan to incorporate some of that on-site boulders that Flintco stored during construction, and we field placed with the superintendent and the landscape contractor later on in the project.
So here you can see a section through the main building on the right to the classroom or studio building on the left, connected by what we call the fracture. Originally at schematic design, the classroom building was designed as a 2-story structure for a 522 capacity learners. But it was determined by the district that the potential for future expansion to a 696 learner school was critical. So the classroom building became 3-story due to the impervious cover limitations we have on the site. So we worked with BGK to reprice the building at schematic design accordingly and went through an extensive value analysis exercise to determine the proper placement of the building, given the extreme grade changes we have across the site, as Marissa discussed earlier. As you can see, the design team paid careful attention to ensure that the 3-story classroom building behind building 1 blended seamlessly with the surrounding buildings. And from these views, you can see that it was, very well achieved and it doesn't stand out. Melissa will now go over some of the structure.
So first I'll say that as structural engineers, our work is usually covered up. So we were very excited to have this opportunity to showcase some steel detailing right at the entrance. The goal of this detail was to expose the structure and connections in order to visually communicate to the students how things are built and how they're put together, and to get those gears turning in their heads. To achieve that goal, the design of this connection took teamwork and coordination in order to achieve beauty, structural integrity, and constructability. Let's move on and start the tour inside. I'll pass it back to Lauren.
So the tour we're going to take today is the exact same tour I would take you on if we were on the site. So starting at the red dot, the entry sequence is typical for an AISD school these days, where reception, admin, and the offices all have really good visibility to the front of the school. You enter into a large vestibule where they're able to vet visitors, and the community room is off just to the right of that large vestibule, so that use of the community room doesn't involve going into the school. We're going to look at the media resource room first, which is just off that main lobby to the right. And then we're going to cross the fracture bridge into the 3-story academic building, what we call building 2. We'll tour through that, and we'll continue in our counterclockwise fashion, come around back to building 1, where we have our fitness and dining, and then make the final bend back to art and music. Finally, we're going to tour you around the outside. So starting with the media resource, which is directly off the lobby. The first thing you see when you enter are the clouds, which are acoustic, obviously, but they also are an abstraction of that karst feature with the lighting, sort of the crystalline vision of that. You have great views from this library and really nice natural light. There's a reading porch right off that is off the courtyard, and we created a seating wall between the library and the lobby that also displays books, as you can see, and provides a place for kids to huddle up with a book. The fracture is an elevated bridge, and that's to allow drainage, but everybody takes the same path to get across. It slightly slopes up to the middle level of building 2, but it required some incredibly careful engineering.
So the fracture support is located in the courtyard, where pretty much every team member had a stake. So we had to prioritize the goals of BGK, Flanco, landscape, and structure. So first we wanted to create an open space for landscape, which drove the decision toward using a singular column. We also kept architectural interests in mind, such as aesthetics and function. We considered proportions and matching the board-formed concrete finish of the surrounding walls. Keeping structural strength, rigidity, and weathering in mind, we also had to think of how Flanco would build the thing. We aimed to minimize the number of pieces of steel and minimize welding, therefore using as many bolted connections as possible to save time and money. We had to get creative to determine the framing, how the framing could be constructed such that the steel columns could be erected safely, as they did not connect directly to the foundation. I'll pass it back to Lauren again to continue to building 2.
Well, you probably want to see the fracture from the upside. You can tell you're going slightly uphill to get to the middle level of building 2. You have really nice balanced light and a view both to the courtyard on the left and upper play on the right. And as you enter building 2, you have a choice of 2 neighborhoods, one on the left, one on the right, and a beautiful long view ahead of you that is of the elevated outdoor classroom. There's also a seat wall, which mirrors the seat wall that you saw in the library. We have one on either end of the fracture corridor. And every time I'm there, you see different things happening in this seat wall, some expected, some unexpected. But it's almost always in use. And this is the view for the termination, that window of the fracture, and you can see the elevated outdoor classroom. I want to bring David Chrissy back to talk about how the school's being used.
You have to make sure that you're speaking the same language as the district and making sure that your initiatives and the things that you are bringing to the table are in line with district core mission values. And one of the things that we as a district in Austin Independent School District focus on are something we call the 6 C's. And they're not soft skills. I really think that that's a misnomer, but those are the skills like critical thinking and communication and creativity and collaboration that we all need, regardless of what job that we do or what career that we pursue. So one of those 6 C's is collaboration, and it was really interesting when I really started wrapping my head around the design and looking at the collaborative spaces and looking at the classrooms that had walls that would move, and looking at and understanding the purpose of flexible seating and natural light. And then really started to think about what students would be doing in those spaces and what teachers would be doing in those spaces. So the one that really sticks out is the whole idea of collaboration. And when we started the school and we opened the doors, albeit late because of COVID-19 and the pandemic, I really felt like we were kind of handcuffed, because the whole purpose of the design from my perspective, and I know there's others, right, was making sure that we were in line and in step with the natural environment that we have been blessed with here, but also making sure that we focused on and foster collaboration. And so my initial thought was, man, we got to stay 6 feet away. We're going to have masks. There's no way that we can really collaborate, and what a bummer. But as we started getting more and more kids in the building, we started to have to think about how we are using our spaces in different ways. And that's the whole purpose of a modernized learning environment, and the idea of kind of kicking out the idea of having a four-walled classroom. So when you walk through the building, when kids are here, you're going to see kids in the hallway. You're going to see kids using that flexible seating. You're going to see grade levels combined. You're going to see classrooms combined. You're going to see us using the maker spaces in different ways and pulling back those walls to allow for distance between kids, but also to allow them to collaborate at just a different distance, basically. So at first, I thought we were going to be handcuffed, and now I feel like we're kind of liberated because we really are using the entire school. So
we always have been working toward creating the most collaborative environment we could. And stacking the floor plates of this academic wing was, with all the studios paired, except for the maker space, was one way of creating the collaboration spaces in between those paired classrooms. There's operable partitions in 2 locations on every floor. There are the collaboration that you see in teal, and then there's group study rooms sprinkled throughout. The other floor plates are very similar. It is truly stacked. The difference on the lower level is that you can access the courtyard directly, and you can access to the 2 back patios and the elevated outdoor classroom. And then the upper level is only different in the upper left-hand corner where we have the speech, PT, and OT. I want to touch on the neighborhood entrances alluded to earlier. We had the idea that these entrances to the neighborhood could be a way of branding and wayfinding. And we suggested a critter and a habitat. And the fact that it might change color by floor. So here you're on the middle floor and there's 2 colors of teal. There's 2 colors of green on the lower level and 2 colors of yellow on the upper level. And you might notice in the lower right-hand corner, there's concrete stamps with the particular critters. So the options we put together initially for the cat were, they liked the idea, and we created this worksheet for the kids to vote. What were their favorite critters and what were their favorite habitats that they wanted to feature? You have to think about concrete comes early in construction. So all of this had to come together very quickly. We're going to take you through the studio as you're coming through that portal or that entrance to a neighborhood. In this case, you can tell that you're on the lower level because it is in green. The wall is green as a wayfinding thing. The school is arranged by age group, by floor. So the youngest pre-K through first are in the middle level. Second and third are on the lower level, and the upper level is the oldest kids. The little ones almost never need to use any stairs. You can see that it's really porous between the studios and the collaboration areas, which makes it really flexible for teaching. But that means that there needs to be a tremendous amount of transparency so that there can be appropriate supervision. And it means that we really needed to pay close attention to the acoustics, which were critical. We use structural acoustic metal deck in all these spaces for that reason, in addition to the baffles. The operable partitions, this is a classroom. Honestly, we just opened in the fall, but it looks like it's been there for 10 years, I think. But this operable partition is closed, but others, when you're there, are open and they're using it more flexibly. Deb's going to pick up the story.
So now we are entering back into building 1, and just like the fracture, there's one common path through the building. This is a ramp, so there is no stair ramp combo. It's all, the kids all take the same path, and these are the common spaces that they're going to use. There's a physical connection to the exterior, both for play and to the outdoor courtyard. But we noted that these spaces needed acoustical consideration, and I'm going to turn it over to Melissa to talk about that.
So Deb mentioned acoustical considerations, and Lauren had mentioned the structural acoustic deck that we used in the studios. We also needed acoustic structural deck in the common areas like the dining and fitness spaces. And we also used acoustic block. Design of the acoustic block walls took a lot of coordination during the design process between architecture and structure. The thing about acoustic block is that it cannot be reinforced. So structurally, we had to treat groups of acoustic block as openings in the walls. So Lauren's team was really gracious and fielded a lot of phone calls from my team, so we could coordinate exactly where all the reinforcement would go in those walls. We ended up providing elevations in our drawings to show where each individual bar would be located so we could get it right. And because this was so critical, we ended up discussing the rebar locations and detailing in our masonry pre-con with BGK and Flintco. And then when construction started, I went out to the site and looked out at the first course of block when it was laid out and checked the locations of all the bars. I'll pass it back to Deb to talk more.
Your heart rate and your breathing, your lungs, right? Okay, that was these cardio. Your whole body's going to be involved in cardio activities. If you think it's a muscular activity, you're going to be working 1 or 2 muscle groups. And if you think it's flexibility, what are you going to be doing probably? That is the action you'll show me, but something that would increase flexibility would be a stretch. Okay? So, we'll do the first one together. Biking. Do you think biking is a cardio activity, a muscular activity, or a flexibility?
So as we look around this fitness area, I want to point out a couple of things. One is that integrated acoustic response that the project has done. You can see the acoustic block and the visual interest they provide, combined with the physical, the acoustic deck, allows for some reverberation control in the space. And as we continue to move around, I want you to notice there's high windows on both sides of the fitness area that provide a balanced light and consistent light into the space. And now we're going to go move into the dining area. And this is the dining and the stage combo. Once again, you can see the vertical stripes next to the stage entrance. Those are part of those acoustical blocks that Melissa was talking about. We have them integrated into the walls, and we have the acoustic deck. There's a wonderful visual connection to the exterior, to the outside dining, and you can see the tree that's in the courtyard there. And then as we move around, you'll see again, there's high windows on both sides of the spaces that allow for balanced light. The stage, just like the corridors, the fracture, have one pathway up from the back of the stage out into the performance area. And it's everyone takes the same path. And here you can see that balanced light within the space, that physical connection back out to the exterior. We're going to move around the corner now, and we're going to look at music and art, and we're going to listen to the kids for just a moment, and then we'll talk about those spaces.
The storm cloud. The pool. And the moon.
So in this space, the acoustic treatment has been slightly different. You can see we have baffles from the ceiling that hang down. There's globe lights that were selected to mimic whole notes in the space. The space is flexible and reconfigurable. And you can see to the left, we have a south-facing window that brings in a lot of light, but we have shades to help mitigate the glare and the contrast within that space.
Okay, so that's going to be, let me hear that pat, 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 pat. Ready? Here we go.
Marissa, you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, so this diagram shows the outdoor learning and play areas. So play is highlighted in orange, and then the purple areas are areas of outdoor learning. And we included the outdoor dining area kind of in the crux of that L building in this as well. So to the north of this plan, you've got the 3 purple outdoor learning decks that connect the studio spaces. And then in that courtyard formed by building 1 and building 2, we've got outdoor dining and 2 outdoor classroom areas.
So the courtyard we left as natural as possible, but we had to achieve some complicated grading for accessibility that was required. Our exterior materials are intended to belong to the site. So we use limestone and stucco and some colored metal panels. It's designed to be active, to meet the vision of the CAT team who wanted to be able to come meet their kids there for lunch and have a great place to be with them. Now we're on the elevated outdoor classroom, which is the termination of that fracture corridor. It's envisioned as a place to use as a classroom, but really teach about science and nature. And you just have the most incredible long view of this beautiful site here. It's designed structurally to receive a roof in the future. And we hope it just ends up being a really special place to take a class, create a memory. Marissa, you were going to take this, or?
Yep, so this is a view of that courtyard space. It's still under construction, as you can tell, and you can really see how the building nestled around those existing trees in the center of that courtyard. To the right-hand side, you can see the stairs and super stairs that were created as an outdoor classroom element. You can see the ramp that brings everyone kind of curving around those existing trees over to the next photo, which shows you the outdoor amphitheater space. As well. So that's a great outdoor gathering place for students. You can see here they've cut our idea of where the outdoor dining occurs, and they've invented their own outdoor dining here in the amphitheater space to have a little picnic lunch.
That's during COVID.
Yes, yeah, spreading out 6 feet apart. So this is going to walk you through the play spaces. There's a little kid play area, which you're seeing here with typical elements, slides, swings, spinners, and these are really designed for play for all abilities. And all abilities doesn't necessarily mean people who are mobile or in a mobility device. All abilities means some kids don't want to run around and play. They want to hide in a nook and read a book, want to use this hill on the left-hand side to roll down in somersaults with their friends. The design of the elements themselves were selected to mimic the natural character of the site. So you'll see here the boulder, the net elements, and part of that 21st century learning is that play is a learning opportunity. You're teaching teamwork, you're developing your gross motor skills. So the elements that we picked for these playgrounds were very specific to help in those learning goals. We know the playground is very successful, as you can see here, but also because families were breaking into the site after the playground equipment was installed to use while the interior of the building was being constructed. So it's a great opportunity for outdoor learning extending into play. So this last piece you'll see here is hardscape play, learning teamwork. But this hardscape area does double duty as our fire lane. So some simple striping for activities that students can participate in, and it doubles as your fire lane. So the final area we want to kick off here is to highlight the teamwork of the group. So this cistern was an element that I think every single member of the design and construction team participated in. This collects rainwater from the building. It also collects condensate. So it touched architecture, structural, irrigation, civil, MEP, sustainability with Deb's team on how to kind of make this not only a beautiful element, it sits right next to the front door, but also to make it functional and a learning tool for the students.
Our second unique feature that we wanted to highlight is our lightweight insulated concrete roofing system. It was suggested by our exterior envelope consultant at the beginning because it has a lot of advantages. And those include like fire rating, it's easy to get the slope that you need, the insulation doesn't require fasteners, it makes re-roofing, which is often an issue, both easier and less wasteful, which makes it more environmental. It's also good acoustically and thermally. So we had all these great reasons to use it, but we really needed to vet with the whole team. It involved everyone. We needed to see if we could afford it, which was Sarah looking into, is it comparable to a tapered insulated mod bit roof? And it involved structural and contractor issues on logistics. So it was a whole team effort. Really, start to end, this team worked together collaboratively, and they were open to new ideas and willing to explore and push the envelope on lots of different aspects. And everything required multiple players to make it happen. We had a fantastic team from all sides, from the owner side, the AE team, and the contractor. Everybody was invested and excited in this project. And we had a pretty good amount of fun along the way. In this picture in the upper right, you can see the CAT team came out to the site for a site tour with David Chrissy. And then next to that on the top, you have the AISD project management team. We had a great project manager in Jean Glenn. Flinko is catty corner in the upper right and lower left. We had a great superintendent and project manager. And then in the lower right-hand corner, we had our board of trustee, Yasmin Wagner, with David Chrissy. This project took a lot of engineering, and we don't have reps from our civil team, which was MWM Design Group, led by Brian Wells, and CNG, led by Josh Baumgartner, who were both instrumental to making it happen. They happened to be guys, so we didn't invite them. There's not enough time to mention every team member by name. I would miss people anyway, but everybody was really fantastic, and we couldn't have done it without them. So with the close, and this is a close-up picture of our limestone veneer that I think looks like an eye. I think I'm probably the only one that does. We'll close the presentation and see if you have any questions for us.
Thank you, Lauren, and everyone. This was fantastic. Really huge accomplishment. I do have a few questions before we move into the audience questions. My first one is, it appears that your team took challenges and turned them into opportunities. What do you think that your team did right to make this happen?
Well, I think really what I just said, we really worked together with the team. We had really good communication, and we relied on each other. There was more interdisciplinary conversations happening on this project than I think almost any other project that I've been on. And I've been on some big projects. Everybody had a lot of buy-in and were really invested, both in the big picture things of making it sit really nicely on the site. And obviously the things we needed to do, we needed to meet budget, we needed to meet that really hardcore impervious cover. But it was the same with the lightweight roofing. You know, it just took, each aspect took a bunch of people to put together.
Could you talk about the Charrette process some? What were some of the activities that maybe yielded unexpected insight? You might have done this regularly with other of your projects.
We do. We are a very collaborative firm. We like to say it's in our DNA. But for me, the most meaningful aspect of this charrette, of working with the CAT team, was the work we did to develop a mission statement, which may sound funny because that may be a rote activity, but in this case, we did a lot of work toward generating what that was. And that was because I wanted to know, how will we know if we were successful at the end of the day? And so I can actually tell you the mission statement was, and at the time the school was called New Southwest. It's envisioned to be a collaborative, nurturing, safe place that welcomes students and contributes to their success. The facility should celebrate its location in Hill Country, sitting lightly on the land, taking advantage of the views, and incorporating the natural environment to create flexible, inviting, progressive learning spaces that foster memories. And when I look back on that statement, I feel really good about it. So that's sort of my Charrette Process takeaway.
I think that's an excellent point and something that we should all aspire to in our projects, to remind us of our mission. You mentioned there's a plan for an addition. What kind of additional spaces are needed, and is that changing as time goes on?
With AISD, I have found that many things change all the time, but the plan for the addition is to bring it from 522 to 696 students. And all of the core spaces were designed to accommodate the 696 from the get-go. So the library, dining, and fitness are all sized appropriately. What we'd need to add is one makerspace, one art room, one music room, and I think 8 studios or classrooms. And so the new addition probably won't have those particular functions. What we at least initially talked about is, well, maybe the 2 music rooms will be over by the dining. So another music room might replace the art room, and the art room might be in the addition. 2 art rooms might be in the addition, so they're together. Who knows what will happen by the time it happens, but those are the program spaces that belong.
How do you see the desire for outdoor learning affecting the future of school design?
I've been talking too much. I'm going to turn that one to Marissa.
Yeah, so I think we touched on that a little bit. The outdoor learning, AISD actually has an outdoor learning specialist. Her name is Ann Muller. She is fantastic. Throughout the bond, I've met with Ann several times at the beginning of the bond. She actually toured some landscape architects and some of the sustainability team around to schools that had installed outdoor classrooms before. And she talked us through, what's really working super well, what's not working, what she wants to see more of. And so she really debriefed us at the beginning, and I've touched back with Ann several times throughout the bond, and on projects that are still under construction and some changes that may need to be made. So it's really spreading the learning throughout campus. So the students aren't in, it's not you go to school, you go to your classroom, you go to lunch, you come back to your classroom anymore. As we've shown, learning happens everywhere now. It's on the playground, it's on the outdoor learning decks, it's, the native plants that are used throughout the site, the cistern, and calculating volume and geometry. That occurs now everywhere. And I think we've created some really great spaces that are flexible, which is the name of the game from Ann. Really, really flexible spaces that can be outdoor picnic space or a place where students can put on an outdoor play. So just that flexibility and those spaces to be outside and spread out and use your outdoor voice and get your wiggles out.
I think that's great. I think the message that you can learn everywhere is just really coming across so strong, and I'm sure the kids are taking that in. There was a question from our attendees that wanted to know if there was a plan to add soccer or baseball fields. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, I'll start. No, there is no plan for soccer or baseball on this site. It would be impossible given the environmental constraints. Marissa, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, it also, it's based on the grade level of the school. So for elementary students, soccer and baseball aren't really part of the curriculum that's taught for PE and things like that. The project development manual that AISD has developed is very specific about what requirements are to be put at each school. So I think middle school triggers a little bit more of a field situation. High school, obviously those facilities are provided. So, and again, with the site, I don't know that you can play baseball on a pretty steep slope, but it could be a new form of baseball or soccer. It'd be pretty hard on this site because of the topography.
Thanks. I understand that. Lauren, I know from your bio that mentorship is important to you and that you give your time to mentor young architects. Can you tell us about your mentors and how they affected your career development? And perhaps the other panelists could speak to the importance of mentorship.
Sure. I'll start. I like to be useful. I like the idea of capturing information and resources and sharing them with folks so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. I am a huge believer, everybody's heard me say this, of not making the same mistake twice. So I do try and keep track of lessons learned on every project and then share it with everybody so that you don't have to make the same mistake somebody else may have made. I try and be a resource for everyone, but there is a special bond to help women figure out their path, what works for them, and how they can successfully navigate both their career and personal path. But I've formed some really lasting relationships with a lot of the folks that I've worked with that have left our office and gone on to something else. And I really value those relationships. So that's sort of my take on why I do it and what I get out of it. But I know both, Melissa, maybe you can chime in.
Yeah, sure. So I think we all benefit from feedback and course correcting and encouragement. And it's like a means of increasing the efficiency of our growth, right? And I think especially as women, I assume that there are mostly women in attendance for this event, we're kind of encouraged from a young age to grow those soft skills and those interpersonal skills. And those are super useful. But I know personally as like a young woman starting my career in this industry, I kind of felt like, do I belong here? Because I was so like soft and I think I had like a sweet demeanor and I was interacting with these like gruff, direct contractors all the time. And I was like questioning if I was in the right place, you know, and then when I started getting mentored, it made me like, it gave me the reassurance that like that's normal and that could be a strength that you can craft and work on, and just kind of helped me decide like what to focus on and what not to focus on. And I think that's really important. And I think mentorship is essential for belonging.
All right, thank you. I totally agree with that. We had a related question from the audience that the team had a lot of women involved. Have you been on projects that featured a similar level of female leaders? And did you find the project dynamics changed in any way? That was pretty much the same question that I had ready to ask. What is it like to work on a team primarily made of women? So,
well, it's fantastic to work on a team primarily made up of women, and we talked about this on, incidentally, I'm on the panel, and I don't think any of us really noted it during the process. It wasn't until the call for entries for this event that we kind of said, hey, this is pretty cool. It's the first time in my memory that I have worked on a project that was led and predominantly comprised of women, at least on the AE side. And it's pretty cool that that was the case. And this event, this tour, celebrates that. That being said, our whole team was great. It was the spirit and the attitude that everybody brought that really mattered. So I think that's why we didn't notice during the process. And it wasn't it was sort of a retroactive look. Hey, we really did have a woman-led team. But, you know, again, just because MWM Design Group and CNG engineers aren't here, they had a tremendous effect on this project. And I don't, you know, I don't want to see them left out.
I want to add a little shout out to especially Brian Wells. He took this project over for MWM as the project manager, kind of pretty far into design. And he was so collaborative. I'm probably one of the most collaborative civil engineers I've worked with. And we ran up at the beginning of design to a lot of no's. No, we can't do that. No, we need the pond to be here. No, it needs to be square. And when Brian came on, it was like, hey, Brian, can we do a heart-shaped pond? That seems cool. And he's like, yeah, let's do it. Let's design it. Let's figure it out. And he just was so willing to collaborate with the whole team and do some really cool, innovative stuff and push the envelope.
It's fantastic. Everyone, you know, we have 5 great panelists here today, but we know that there are so many more people involved. So thank you for that, Marissa. There's also another question for you, Marissa, which is asking if you could describe some of the strategies for reducing on-site water use.
Yeah, so we used a lot of native plant material, and we pride ourselves in the right plant in the right place. And one of the big strategies for reducing water use on the campus was discussions early on in the bond process of what to use that AISD wouldn't have to irrigate permanently. So large swaths of this site and other AISD bond projects use a native grass mix that is temporarily irrigated to establish. It's had a little trouble getting going, but I think eventually it will fill in and be a great kind of native prairie across the site. Again, with collecting the condensate and rainwater, we do have a domestic feed to that cistern to fill it up if those 2 items don't fill the tank needed for an irrigation cycle. But we are seeing a lot of rainwater and a lot of that condensate filling up that tank and irrigating the plants across the site. So typical strategies of subgrade drip on all of our shrub material, bubblers at the trees, but everything is native enough so that in 1 to 2 years, AISD can shut off or dial back that irrigation and everything can kind of naturalize.
Fantastic. That's great to hear that detail about that. I think we have time for maybe one more question, and I'm not sure if you've overheard this, but I think the audience might be interested in hearing about the kind of comments you have gotten or overheard from the students. You may not have talked to the students directly, but can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, that's actually a really hard one because we haven't had a lot of interaction with the students since the school has been opened. We did obviously go there to do these videos, but I have had more conversations with there are a couple of CAT team members that are now teaching at the school, not only David Chrissy, who's the principal, but the art teacher was on the CAT team and a couple other folks. And I've had some pretty extensive conversations with the librarian, and the feedback has been really positive. Everybody has seemed super happy. And when we did go around with the videos to film, we did talk to a couple kids. There was nothing, there's no little anecdote that I can think of to share, but they definitely like the space and enjoy being there. You can just see it.
I think you had mentioned that that this school had maybe the highest return to the classroom during COVID. Is that correct?
This is both a good thing and a bad thing. So David Chrissy is a phenomenon in terms of what he's doing with the school. And the school itself having a brand new place to go is exciting. And they came up to the size right away, and they had more people attending in person than I think almost any other percentage-wise than any other school in the district. They had a really high percentage of people that wanted to be there in person.
And David has told us in the chat that they're up to 70%. So
Yeah.
that's excellent news.
And he's also shared with me that they're going to be over capacity in a very short amount of time, like maybe by next year, which that's the negative, because once this school is designed flexibly. So that's good because you can accommodate some people without, busting at the seams. But eventually, if that trend continues, and we expect that it will, they're going to need that addition sooner rather than later.
That's true. Well, thank you, everyone. That brings us to the hour. We have an evaluation form that's for this event. I believe it's in the chat, but we'll get that to you. Can you speak to that, Julia?
I believe the evaluation will come up automatically once you leave the event. It's embedded within the Zoom webinar here. And so once you exit from this presentation, you'll see the questions pop up for you. We thank you in advance for answering those. And thank you to this incredible team. And I also want to give a special thank you to Randy Davis for putting this presentation together. I think we can all agree it's been extremely exceptional and extremely successful as our first virtual tour. We really felt that this was able to present to you the experience of actually being there in a time when we can't get together in person. So thank you very much, Randy. We appreciate all the hard work it took to coordinate this huge effort putting this event together.
Thank you, Ankiru. Everyone, great job. And I invite everyone to look for our tours later in the year, and we have a good lineup planned. So we'll be sending out the announcements soon. Thank you.